Hi, everyone. Okay, welcome to the second section of the event. I'm Ronald Chung, the chairperson of FSTE, the Federation for Self-Financing Tertiary Education in Hong Kong. It's my privilege to be here today as the moderator of this particular section. COVID-19 has forced Hong Kong and the world to switch from face-to-face learning and teaching to the alternative, which carry a number of names, e-learning, remote learning, online learning, and so on, okay? So it looks like the pressure will still be haunting us for quite some time. Now, the education sector has to adapt to these changes in a rush. This particular forum comes very timely. So we want to know how the stakeholders have been coping with the changes, how they see what could be coming in the future. So there have been a number of forums lately on this particular subject in Hong Kong. But this particular forum is unique in at least two ways. Rarely do we have academics from Hong Kong and other parts of the world present on the same floor to share the thoughts. Today we have people from Hong Kong. We also have people from the United Kingdom. And even more rarely do we have students sharing the experience. Usually we had only the academics, but this time we also have the students. Today we have not only the sub-degree and degree program students from Hong Kong, but we would also have degree and postgraduate students from Oxford University of UK. So allow me to say a few words about the speakers today. The full bio sketch is in the website of the forum, so I'll be very brief over here. From Hong Kong, we have Professor Chan Kai-ming, who is the Emeritus Professor at the University of Hong Kong. He was the Dean of Education, the Vice President, and also the Senior Advisor to the Vice Chancellor of the University. We also have a household name from United Kingdom. We have Professor Jonathan Mitchie, who is Professor of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange at the Oxford University. There, he is also the director of the Department for Continuing Education and also the president of the Kellogg College. Professor Mitchie is also the chair of UO, University Association for Lifelong Learning, which is actually an alliance of all the continuing education arms of the universities in UK and beyond. So we welcome Professor Chan. We also welcome Professor Mitchie. Now, we also have a number of students from Hong Kong and also UK. There are Mr. Yanis Zito, who is actually a nursing student of BU in a Baptist University in School of Continuing Education. We also have Vivian Kwok, who is actually a professional accountancy undergraduate student from the Chinese University. We also have Anthony Wang, who is a student of the Higher Diploma in Hotel Management of Hong Kong University Space. We also have KZ, who is actually an early childhood education undergraduate program of Yiu Chung College of Hong Kong. So we welcome them. We also have two Oxford students here with us. We have Helen Carrasso, who is actually studying part-time master degree program in history of design. She actually has completed her undergraduate degree when she was in her early 20s. And then she finished an MBA at a later time, and then a doctorate when, in her 50s. So now she's studying a part-time master degree program in history of design. We also have Philippa with us, who is actually studying an undergraduate diploma in the history of arts. In fact, he had a bachelor degree in English language and literature, and then he also pursued career in banking and finance and so on. Okay, so let's start the forum. Now, I somehow would like to throw this question to Professor Chan. The landscape of teaching, learning, and assessment is changing some people say a new normal is forming. What is the role of the university in this new normal in terms of innovation and development? Professor Chen.
I have to unmute myself and see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as I said earlier, uncertainty is the norm, and therefore I really don't see how I can answer this question, because it is really a matter of the situation for the time being is blended learning, and people will have different ways of looking at the three parts of learning: traditional, they say, face-to-face learning, self-directed learning, which may not be online or offline, and then learning, experiential learning, they say, in social context, in social reality, and so on and so forth. So I really don't see that we can at this point say that it would definitely be like this or definitely be like that. And it's not a time for us to say which is good, which is bad, because everything is evolving. And the speed of evolving is much faster than expected. That is a very, I don't think I have answered your question, but that is what I have in mind at this point.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chen. Can I invite Professor Michi to address the same question? Professor Michi, please.
Thank you.
Yes. You have turned off your microphone.
It's on. It's on.
Yeah, it looks like it's on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there was a fascinating report published in Britain just over 100 years ago in 1919. And the reason it was published was during the First World War, the government had set up a ministry for reconstruction to think how on earth you think about what would then be the new normal and how you reconstruct society, the economy after a world war. And perhaps the most significant thing that ministry for reconstruction did was to establish a committee on adult education, which published a report in 1919, which said that it was vital that the country, society, developed education for the whole population throughout their lives, adult education, lifelong learning. And it's fascinating looking back at that report, because the three main arguments they gave, I think, are just as important and relevant and urgent now. In fact, we created a centenary commission 100 years later to publish a report which was published 100 years after that in November 1919. And I could put it in the chat, but it's available free of charge at centenarycommission.org. And the three main arguments used in 1919, which are just as important now, but interesting with COVID-19, I think just as important, but we can think about them in more imaginative ways, given the better use of technologies, is firstly, they said there were societal-wide issues that had to be debated, discussed by everybody. So everybody needed a degree of education so they could engage in those sort of debates and so on. They were thinking, of course, about not allowing a slip towards another world war, but now we've got the climate crisis, and I think you could not think of an issue more appropriate for an educated population to discuss not just the climate crisis itself, but democratic issues of how you then lobby organizations, companies to change their behavior, how you influence the government at national and local level, and so on. Secondly, they said that the world of work was changing, and there would be new technologies, new industries over the horizon, which aren't yet known. And this actually relates very much to the very good point Professor Cheng made in his lecture earlier today about needing a more sort of holistic type of education, because they said for that reason, it was no good just training workers in today's technologies. you have to have a workforce and indeed a population with the capabilities and capacity to think about new things when they emerge and use those new technologies imaginatively, even if they haven't been trained in that specific technology. And then thirdly, they said at this time, the electorate was being extended. For the first time, the vote was being given to many more people, not quite the whole population, but many more people. And so they said it was therefore obviously vital that the whole population, the electorate, was educated in order to be able to engage in discussions, debates, think critically, weigh up evidence, and be able to distinguish between, and this is not my words, this is what they said 101 years ago, distinguish between, on the one hand, genuine political arguments, from, on the other hand, demagoguery. And unfortunately, that need is as urgent now as it's ever been. So I think all those are just as important. But in each case, I think now, today, we can see how the use of technologies combined with face-to-face learning can help in each situation with the world of work and the whole population at local and national levels being able to discuss together.
Okay, thank you, Professor Michi. So technology has actually a very important role to play in this particular era, in this new normal. So one way or the other, we have to pick up those technologies. Now, we turn our attention to some of our students. Yanis is from the nursing school. Yanis is actually a student in the Baptist University. Now, let's say people throw this particular question to you. We would like to know how you would answer it. To some educators, assessment is an essential part of education. In e-learning and teaching, do you think IDing, that is seeking the identification of a student, is in assessment is necessary and doable? So, what do you think, Yanis?
I think the higher education institutions can do some student identity authentication in course and module assessments. From my past experience, some guidelines are set up to ensure our student identity authentications while having course assessments. We are required to log in Zoom using the student ID and turn on our camera. A declaration form needs to be signed before assessments to ensure those are our original work. Okay. And for the institution to address this problem, we can introduce the cutting-edge technology. There is one study focusing on the findings from a pilot study undertaken by the Open University UK as part of the EU-funded adaptive test-based e-assessment system for learning, TESLA. An intriguing reference in the Tesla system is that a suggested varying instrument combination to check student authentication and authorship. And one of the approach is the biometrics, which is the facial recognition, and it analyzes the face and facial expressions, voice recognition, which is analyzing the audio structures, and the keystroke analysis, which is analyzing how the user uses the keyboard. And other approach is the textual analysis, which is anti-plagiarism. And by institutions have introduced Turnitin system, such system can use text matching to detect the similarities between the documents and websites. And forensic to verify the authorship of the written documents. And the other approach is the security and digital signature to authenticate and timestamp to identify when an event is recorded by the computer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Yanis. That is actually very interesting. So some of the technology can actually help us detect from people's writing whether this particular writing is from that particular person or not. Because everyone has certain pattern in their writing. I think that's what Yanis was referring to. Okay, that's new to many people, including me. Okay, now Vivian, I know you are from the accountancy study. So So I always think people from the accountancy insist on everything being accountable, right? So, so identification of people and so on, that is actually part of the accountability. Okay, how do you see the same question? How would you see that?
So, let me introduce myself, and I'm Vivian Kwok, a final year student who is currently studying in the CHK. So, in response to the global pandemic, and my university has like similar to Yanner's university, and we have selected the online platform Zoom as the primary platform instead of face-to-face teaching to support all teaching and learning activities, and to ensure the student identity authentication in courses, and professor and teachers can restrict the meeting to specific users in the accounting setting function. So only authenticated user or a particular group of user with the university's email can join the specific courses or meeting. On the other hand, there's a new method introduced by my university to assure the fairness of the tests or examination. So like yesterday, I took a test, and students are required to use 2 devices when they're taking the assessment. So one is the computer, which is used for doing the online examinations, and another one is the mobile phone, which is used to show the surrounding and desktop. So I believe that doing this way can definitely discourage any academic dishonesty behavior, because as you know, when I'm studying accountancy program, and there are lots of public examination we have to take, and we have to use the school examination to exam those courses for facilitate students' online learning experience. And I think the institution can better support students with blended study mode. That means like mixing with face-to-face and online learning, because maybe not all students have the accessibility to technology. And also schools can provide teaching guidelines to students for the purpose of teaching them like how to use Zoom, so that it can increase the flexibility in terms of availability, because students can customize their own learning experience based on their situation. So that is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay. Now Philippa is from UK. You are all the way from UK. Welcome, and we thanks for your support.
Thank you.
And also, hello. And Philippa is also studying something different from what Vivian and Janice have been studying. Philippa is actually studying history of arts, so it's more on the arts and humanities side and so on. Okay. Now, if people ask you what new student support services do you think should be there in the e-learning era, how would you answer that question?
Sorry, which the support services?
Right, the new support services for the new normal.
The whole situation is so very complex for us, and if I might be so cheeky as to go back to some of the things Professor Cheng said, and I think one of the things he mentioned was he described it as emergency e-learning, and I think we are in a stage of transition that none of us were expecting this, and so we're taking an awful lot of new things on board, as are our teaching support team. And so I think once we've got through that transition, and you're starting with a clean sheet of online learning, then it becomes a little easier, possibly. But I was making a few notes as we went along, and it was interesting your comment about putting the learning back onto the responsibility of the student, which is very much what we do with art. You have to look at it, you have to interpret. But one of the things that we miss is learning from each other. that you can get in a face-to-face situation, that you can get on field trips. And so I think that's possibly what I would look to develop in terms of, you know, in a large group with online, you may get someone who dominates, you may get someone who has a problem with their IT that takes over the learning. And so how you split into smaller groups and learn from each other is, I think, a next challenge. And I've also noticed that we've got very used to everything happening very quickly. So you go to the library, you choose a book, you take it out, you read it. Now, if you do that, you have to book, you have to plan. If you take it back, it has to go into quarantine for days. And suddenly we've got a slowing of the learning process that we hadn't predicted. And so it's just having that support system that everybody says, yes, we know what it's like. So all of those things. I'm also, the other note that I wrote down was, my fear is that things may become for a little while more prescriptive, because you haven't got the fluidity of learning that we have had, that you suddenly make everything more compartmentalized until we've got used to the new normal. And so there are a lot of challenges ahead, but I think that the questions are how you get that interaction between your colleagues and how you actually learn a new pace at the challenges we're facing right now.
Okay, so you were saying there might be a need of certain platform, structured platform for peers, including students, including instructors, to support one another in a way. Is that you're proposing?
Well, it would be lovely, but I think we've probably asked already too much of our teaching environment and the staff. They're having to do so many new things. I think that's perhaps something down the line rather than now. But as everyone is saying, we're not planning for now. We're planning for the next 5 and 10 years, and suddenly things are moving in a direction we'd not predicted, and we have to embrace that.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. So Anthony is from the Hotel Management School. So if somebody asks you, well, at least throw out this particular comment. E-learning is always second to face-to-face learning. Would you agree with that particular statement? What new or best practices should be there to make e-learning better? So Anthony, please.
Hello guys, I'm Anthony Wang from Hospitality in HBS SCC. Well, for the best practice of learning, I always think there are couples of good practice. For example, like lecturer could record the lesson, because as Professor Chang told us, there are some enthusiastic lecturer always are teaching the class, and there are always some punchline and there are always some key points that they only remind in the class and we can't get it back on a note. So the good practice of the recording the lesson, that for our students, we can get back, we can just record, we can just get back to see the recording to revise how the lecturer taught us. And next, and that would be the teaching, with this college can add some different interactive teaching technology. Like in Hong Kong, there are a few lecturers and few different colleges, they're using an application called Kahoot, a kind of a game-based learning platform for student. For student can be like not typing and talking through camera. They can do little bit game-based, like while they are doing face. And next, I'm from hotel management, so I would be attending some class like for food and beverage, front desk management. For these two lecture, actually would be better for face-to-face class. But during this pandemic, we are forced to stay at home, and I suggest there is some practice for the college. Maybe for the front office management, there's a software called Opera that about the global hotel, they're all using Opera for their front desk management. So I propose to different college, maybe they could use some Opera and different software to help students to learn at home. And at last, I think these are some good practices for just maximize the benefit of remote learning. And society is changing and learning is changing. So I hope this is some different best good practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Practicum is always difficult. So it's very hard to replace practicum. This is always a headache. Now, Kay from the early childhood education might have similar headache because early childhood education also emphasizes a lot about practicum. So Kay, how would you answer that question? The same question for you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kay, and I would like to answer this question as following points. First of all, I would like to say I did agree with Anthony. He said maybe we can do more flexible, like using the mobile app to teach students with the online teaching, because some of the platform is not easy to work for the situation now. So I think the mobile app is more efficiency for us to learn, and I think it's the maximum benefits for students to learn nowadays. And for the second point, I would like to suggest that we can be more flexible, like if the real teaching hours is 3 hours, but we can change the hours, like half conduct online and half conduct with the assessment teaching. Like teacher can provide more extra work for students to have their own learning by them to work it in their own time. So I think this is 2 points what I want to suggest. And the third time is I would like to say we can think about from the teacher's perspective, because some of teachers may not very well on teaching in the Zoom. Like one of my lecturer, he is not really well on the Zoom, so there may be some problems, like the personal issue will show on in front of the class. So I think we can give some support for the teacher before the Zoom teaching. That's the maximum benefits for students to learn and maximum benefit for teacher to teach. That's what I want to share. Yes.
Thank you, Kay. So in some majors, it's going to be very difficult to replace all the learning and teaching by online practice and so on. Okay. So lastly, I would like to invite some sharing from Helen. Helen Carrasco, who is actually a postgraduate student in Oxford. How do you address the same questions? Some people say e-learning is always second to face-to-face learning. How do you see that?
Thank you. I think probably what I'll end up saying will draw together a lot of the things other people have been saying, because there have been some really interesting points so far. And I think there's a different answer to your question for the current cohort who are in transition, which is a point that's already been made, to people who start a course that has been planned this way, who knew that they were going to be undertaking e-learning. I mean, those of us who are continuing study are very grateful for all the work that's been done to allow us to continue our study safely, but it's not what many of us signed up for or what many of us expected. And there, for various subjects, there are various disadvantages, which simply the resources are not there, the staff time is not there to address at short notice. So thinking more constructively longer term, I think benefits for students are things like the opportunity that Professor Cheng mentioned in the Q&A for students to look at a wider range of institutions and a wider range of courses. It's much easier to think about studying outside your own country in a different environment. Many online learning programs offer at least some flexibility about the time and the place you study. There may be sessions that are a set time seminar, but quite a lot of it you can dip in and out. And of course, you often have the ability to revisit content. We've talked about recording lectures, so you can learn more easily at your own pace. And hopefully that wider diversity of students that a course can attract because of this wider recruitment pool will benefit all the students because of the breadth of experience that they bring in to the course. But picking up on points that Philippa made, particularly, I do think you need a mix of formal and informal sessions. It's not so easy to have that quiet word outside class in the margins if you didn't quite pick something up without it being embarrassing. How you develop that peer-to-peer support and resource sharing. My own course, we're getting quite active with e-notice boards if we find interesting things we think others would like. So it doesn't drown the main course content, but we can say, has anybody seen this? Look, I think it's quite interesting. An awareness by our institutions of the sorts of barriers that some people might have to participation, whether it's time difference, digital access, learning styles, different ways that disabilities need to be addressed if you're teaching online. And again, as I think it was Kay said, it's very important that we support all these people who are putting an enormous amount of work into preparing to teach us to understand the medium they're working in, maybe to think about building in more opportunities for questions midway through sessions, because it's less easy just to interject. And if you sit for 40 minutes being talked at, it then becomes a bit stilted. How to, particularly how to engage everyone, I think is an issue that some teachers are maybe struggling with. And also how to help to foster the transferable skills we've learned about, the things Jonathan talked about. You know, it's the learning to learn, learning to cope with the changing world, particularly in research intensive universities, which might be more tied to curriculum content than to the more generic learning skills. So lots of positives in there, but supporting our staff to help us to achieve them.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive answer to the question, and it's actually very informative. Now we have a couple of questions from the floor. One of them is actually very interesting. I don't know about UK, but in Hong Kong, some students actually turn off the camera and hide their faces in the online section. Okay, perhaps some students in UK do the same and so on, but then in Hong Kong, it's rather common. So that actually raised certain questions about the actual level of engagement with the learning, and it posed certain difficulty to teachers who actually demand certain visual feedback from the students and so on, see whether they are actually stuck with something and so on, okay? So that posed certain difficulty to instructors. So any comments from the students? This question is actually addressed to the students. Any comments from the students for us to understand why they did it that way? Any particular issue bothering them and so on? Perhaps one or two students could actually share.
Hello, I'm Yanis. Indeed, yeah, I'm Yanis.
So I see Yanis raised her hand. So I'm sorry, I might not. But let's invite Yanis to share. Thank you.
Okay. And indeed, some of my teachers encounter the same question, claiming that they're talking to themselves and they get limited response from the students. And I think the teachers can utilize the use of breakout rooms and the polling in Zoom to foster interactions and learning by clarifying some concepts. And indeed, some of the students may not be able to turn on the camera and microphone due to several reasons. One of the reasons is the living environment in Hong Kong. During the pandemic, family members are staying at home, and the background may be so noisy, and they are not able to turn on the camera and microphone. One of the solutions is that teachers can make use of the breakout rooms or the chat rooms and some software like Kahoots or even the polling in the Zoom. This can let the teachers know that whether the students can understand those concepts or not. And other tool is using the annotations. Annotations can be used by an instructor as well as by students to collectively add notes or drawing to a shared slide. Yeah, that's my opinion. Thank you.
So I would like to hear from UK as well. Helen or Philippa, you have any, do you want to answer that question? How was the phenomenon in UK?
Quite a lot of people, what normally happens, certainly in my own classes, is that we all switch everything on for the discussion stage, but when we get into the lecture, we tend to turn off as much as anything because it can be a distraction. Because it's not, the faces can come up quite large on the screen depending on how you've got your screen set. And somebody sneezes or somebody, somebody's child walks into view. So it's a bit the sorts of things that you're talking about there, about the environment not always being an isolated environment. So it avoids distracting people. But as I say, we do tend, unless somebody hasn't got a good connection, and of course, sometimes by putting the video on, you lose, your line is not good enough. Then people will always put the video on when it comes to discussion seminar areas.
Okay, I see that. All right. Okay, so I think we can entertain one more question. This time it's for the academics. Okay. Now this question goes like this: can we have comments from teachers on what they think about online teaching and learning? It has been reported that many institutions and their academic staff are not yet ready on online teaching. So I think first let's have Professor Michi answer that question first, and then Professor Chan's turn.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely right. So in Oxford, we tried to give a lot of support to the lecturers who have had to teach online for the first time. And we're fortunate in our department, continuing education, because we've had fully online courses for years. So there's a bit more experience, but some other departments, the faculty had never taught online before. So the university has given a lot of support to that. So some subjects, the faculty just have to do it, and you just have to support them as much as they can. In other areas in our department, because we've got so many courses for the public, which can't be done face-to-face at the moment, we're able to choose just a selection to put online. And there we're very mindful about choosing ones where the academics are very good at online teaching. But otherwise, it's just a question of what our students have said. We've just got to continually try to improve.
So indeed, it's not everyone being ready for the whole thing, huh? Okay. So Professor Chan, would you like to share a few points on that?
Yes, but it really depends on how ready the academics in the institution are used to that. In my own faculty of education, when I taught them, but even now, we've been using web-based websites for all courses since, I don't know, 20 years ago. Yes, 90s, in the end of 1990s. However, there are still one or two professors. It's the first time. One of my very good friend, he said, I wanted to wait until it is not necessary, right? But then now it is necessary. And after several lectures, he said, well, it's quite good. But I agree with Helen that whether the students turn on or turn off the camera is not essential. But whether you have real tutorials for small group interaction is so important, right? If you have a whole class of 50 people sitting in the lecture room and everybody is turning on their laptop, you really don't know who's listening, who's not listening, right? And even they are looking at you, you're not so sure their minds are with you. So I think it's not like a kindergartens, right? You have to police every student, otherwise they don't learn. But in universities, it's different. It's their choice. And I totally agree. Even now in a very prestigious webinars, you see most of people are turning off their cameras when the major speakers are speaking. I don't think now, actually, I agree totally with Helen that sometimes switching off is a new way of courtesy rather than a matter of impoliteness, because then but whether you are listening or not, I don't think it is a matter of, if you have a whole hall of 200 people, you really don't know who's listening, who's not listening. And even everybody's listening, I can assure you that what they get from you is quite different. Sometimes I could go to a lecture in a huge, in China, you know, it's always hundreds of people, thousands of people. They come up to you and say, that's very good. I said, what do you mean by very good? You ask 10 people, they give you 10 different answers. Everybody has their own attention, own selection. And so it's a freedom. If everybody, when they turn off the camera and they're still listening, that means your reception rate is very high, like a television channels. And otherwise you're low. But this is the reality. So I'm quite comfortable with that.
Well, thank you.
At least now nobody is turning off the camera. But we are panelists, of course.
So we are almost at the point of coming to the end of the whole event and so on. I would like to invite a final remark from Professor Michi. Anything you want to say to wrap up the event on your side, on the UK side?
Well, I've greatly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's certainly one of the best learning experiences I've had for a long time. And the previous lecture by Professor Cheng K-Ming, I thought was outstanding, very, very wise. I agree with the comments made. I think the opportunity is to combine the best of face-to-face learning and online learning, because we've all got examples where face-to-face is essential. For example, in Britain, we were under complete lockdown. We weren't allowed to do anything, and we had to ask permission from the university to do anything face-to-face. And Philippa mentioned site visits, but the first permission we got to do anything face-to-face was from our archaeologists who needed to do an archaeological dig. And so they went into the field and they got permission to do that. So things like that, obviously face is essential, but on the other hand, face-to-face, online is fantastic as well, because although I'm sure Philippa, Helen and I would have loved to come out to Hong Kong to participate in this, at least this
we'll
way.
Welcome you with open arms.
Well, I look forward to it, both, but at least this time I can go back to college for lunch in time.
Okay.
So,
Helen as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think it's a question of getting the best balance of the best of face-to-face and online, but also there's an additional opportunity, which is that we can all make better use of online resources than we previously did. The example of Anthony just having having automatically recording lectures so that students can check back, later, and also teaching hybrid. So even if you're doing a face-to-face class, allowing some people to dial in if they have to, either because they've got health issues, but also I think my final point would be, I hope that this new I agree very much with Professor Cheng's characterization of the uncertain normal. I think uncertainty will remain. I hope that this segues into the dealing with the climate crisis, and so that we don't have to always fly across the world if not necessary. I mean, I was giving a supervision to one of my DPhil students early this week, who's in Australia, is actually locked down in Australia, but it would have been mad if he'd flown all the way to Britain and all the way back just for one supervision when we had a perfectly good supervision online. So I think there's a big opportunity to make the best of both worlds.
Thank you, Professor Michi. Professor Chen, any final word for us?
No, not final word. But I have only.
Yes, I have only 2 points. One is I agree with Philippa that it's not a matter of online, offline. It's a matter of to what extent human beings can learn together, which is now supported by science of learning, because they discover that in human brains there's a kind of a mirror neuron, so that people are echoing to each other, inducing each other's brains. And that is the fundamental of human learning. And why we have lectures? Because you learn from a person. So this is the fundamental thing. Offline, online, perhaps it's not the essential issue. The issue is whether this shutdown and the online forced online learning has created an opportunity for us to understand how autonomous, self-directed, active learning could take place without teachers' supervision, as teachers are monitoring. That is a golden opportunity. We really don't know. And I suppose this is, in the end, will be a very good opportunity for us to learn. I wouldn't say this is successful, because you can see from different countries, there are different results. But at least this is a possibility, and I'm not saying that I welcome the possibility or I refute the possibility, but this possibility will force into our lives. And so we have to understand whether to what extent we can really give students an additional freedom, additional autonomy because of technology. Second is, I appreciate very much that this is an opportunity for us to talk to each other through technology. Now the country borders are getting tighter and tighter, and it's all government behavior. We people are not hostile to each other. So why should we be enemies to one another? Academics are never enemies to one another. So I hope technology helps us to cross the borders. I hope there wouldn't be a day when we need a visa to have a cross-border webinars. So I think this is the way to look to the future, despite the very short-term politicking, short-term hostility.
Okay,
thank
you, Professor Cheng. In closing, I would like to thank everyone who has participated in this particular event, Professor Chen, and also a number of local students here in Hong Kong. We have Yanis, we have Anthony, we have Kay, we have Vivian, and so on. And in particular, we thank Professor Michi and also Philippa and Helen, who joined us all the way from UK. I know it's early in the morning in UK, even though it's late afternoon in Hong Kong. So I presume they have got up very early this morning. So we thank them. Now, for the audience information, the playback of this particular forum will be made available starting from the coming Monday, October 19th. Information will be disseminated to the participants in time. Okay, so let's close here, and we wish everyone good health and all the success in teaching and learning. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.